I was at a scenic overlook just yesterday, one of those spots famous for its sweeping views of the valley. Standing right at the edge was a young woman, perfectly dressed, holding a phone up to frame the sunset. And she spent about 15 minutes, adjusting her angle, fixing her hair, tweaking the exposure settings to get the lighting just right. But what was so fascinating was that she never once looked at the actual horizon with her own eyes. Her gaze was just glued entirely to this 6-inch screen, monitoring the digital representation of the sunset rather than the sunset itself. She finally gets the shot, and immediately her whole demeanor shifted. She began furiously tapping away, presumably applying filters. I watched her swipe the sky to this neon pink, a color that definitely wasn't in the sky in front of us, and then, satisfied, she put the phone in her pocket and walked back to her car. She didn't stay for a single second to actually breathe in the air or watch the light fade. It was such a jarring moment. She had traveled all this way not to experience the world, but to extract a digital artifact from it. The photo she created was more real to her than the physical moment she just completely ignored. It felt like a perfect and honestly a slightly terrifying example of how the map has started to devour the territory, where the proof of living has become more important than the living itself. That moment, for me, it really crystallized the problem we're facing today. It's what we're calling the inversion, that crucial point where the digital model stops just representing physical reality and actually starts to supplant it. It becomes the object of value, the thing we pay attention to. So today, we are undertaking a deep dive into this highly simulated world. We're going to be analyzing the economic, the political, the cognitive costs of this shift. Our mission is to really dissect this technological transformation and, maybe most critically, examine the intentional resistance strategies, the ways people are trying to fight back and reclaim their footing in actual reality.
I think this is probably the most essential conversation of the decade, because this inversion, it impacts 3 really deep core areas of our lives, and it often works just beneath the surface of our daily awareness. So we've structured this deep dive into 3 movements. First, we're going to establish the economic contamination of digital space. We'll look at the rise of AI-generated content pollution, widely known as AI slop. Yeah. And we'll examine the collapse of value it creates for human labor and creativity.
And for truth itself, I imagine.
And for verifiable truth, absolutely. Second, we'll pivot to the high-stakes neuropolitical consequences, how the weaponization of our attention and our dopamine loops is fundamentally reshaping political participation and eroding our ability to focus.
Just fragmenting the whole public sphere.
Precisely. And then finally, we'll explore the strategies being developed to fight back. We'll look at architectural, philosophical, and design strategies, specifically how intentional friction can help us reclaim our cognitive sovereignty, turning, passive consumption back into active engagement.
Okay, let's unpack that, this synthetic wasteland. Let's start with defining the pollution itself. We're calling it AI slop. It's a concept that feels like it's just contaminating everything online right now.
It is. And when we say slop, we're talking about digital content, text, images, audio, you name it. It's made with generative AI, and it's characterized by this profound lack of human effort, of genuine quality, or any deeper lived meaning.
It's just digital clutter, filler content.
Exactly. Digital clutter is the perfect term,
right?
But it's produced in this overwhelming, truly unprecedented volume.
The volume is key, but you said the danger is in how convincing it looks.
The danger lies in its convincingness, absolutely. Yeah. For the average person just scrolling quickly, this content looks persuasive, it looks legitimate at first glance, and we have to understand why. Modern AI models, LLMs, they are exceptionally good at mimicking form.
Surface level stuff.
Surface level stuff. They master syntax, they nail the style, the tone, the formatting, so it passes that immediate visual inspection. They are masters of the aesthetic surface.
But what are they missing underneath? This feels like the core of what makes slop, slop.
They fundamentally lack a human understanding of meaning, of intent. They just operate through statistical prediction. A human writer understands the weight of a concept like tragedy because they have lived, breathed, processed human emotion. An LLM.
It just knows what word usually comes next.
Precisamente. It merely predicts the next statistically probable word to follow tragedy, based on billions of training examples. So the result is this sophisticated statistical parody of human expression. It's frictionless, it's painless, it's contextless, which means the content landscape is becoming one where actual meaning is just continually undermined. You can't tell if it's from a human or a machine generating shells of thought.
And the scale of this production, that's what creates the wasteland effect. We're past the point where platforms just hold content. They're being inundated.
Completely inundated. The numbers are just staggering. In 2024, credible estimates suggested that over 40% of the new articles posted on a platform like Medium were AI generated.
40%. Almost half of everything new.
Nearly half. And this feeds directly into this concept that people are calling the dead internet theory.
Right, which isn't that the internet is literally off, but that it's just bots talking to bots.
Exactly. The overwhelming majority of web traffic, of interaction, of content, it's just bot-to-bot chatter, automated marketing, or AI filler. It's no longer a human bazaar of connection. It's an automated factory producing empty output.
That sounds profoundly lonely. If I'm scrolling through a platform that looks social, but I know most of the activity is machine-driven, what does that do to you psychologically?
It creates a sense of uncanny loneliness, profound atomization. It's the uncanny valley concept, but applied to all our digital interactions. The landscape looks human, it uses human language, it references human events, but the underlying intelligence is just alien and cold.
So you're scrolling through this synthetic social world that's mimicking connection, but there's no real person on the other side.
No genuine reciprocity. So the result is this slow erosion of shared reality and trust, because you can no longer be confident that the shared culture you are consuming is authentically collective. The map isn't just devouring the territory, it's filling the map with fake, phantom topography.
And this problem shifts really fast from just an existential dread to tangible, life-altering harm when you need clear, reliable information. You mentioned a couple of examples where the sheer volume of slop actively made crisis situations worse.
Exactly. In times of disaster, the flood of AI-generated noise, unverified images, redundant alerts, sensationalized text, it can immediately drown out life-saving signals. Official sources, genuine aid workers, they just can't get through. We saw this starkly with Hurricane Helene in the U.S. in 2024.
It was one of the first major disasters of this new AI era, right?
It was. And the pattern just repeated itself during Myanmar's devastating earthquake in March of 2025.
So how did that actually play out on the ground? What was the impact?
Well, aid organizations and local authorities, they found that their attempts to disseminate critical information, safe evacuation routes, locations for medical supplies, were just immediately overwhelmed by competing, conflicting, and often just outright false information that was generated at machine scale.
So it's not just misinformation, it's an information fog.
An information fog, that's a perfect way to put it. One observer noted it was so thick that it disoriented aid efforts and significantly delayed official responses. And when that kind of information fatigue sets in, the system starts to shut down. People stop trusting any signal, which then erodes the willingness to volunteer or donate. They just can't verify who or what to trust.
And beyond these huge disasters, the slop shows up in everyday consumer fraud. I thought the example of online retailers using AI images to sell seeds for plants that literally do not exist it's perfect. They're selling an impossible beauty.
An impossible beauty. And the most public, maybe most hilarious example of this was the spectacular collapse of the Willie's chocolate experience in Glasgow.
Oh, that was just wild.
The organizers spent almost their entire budget on these fantastical, hyper-saturated, AI-generated promotional graphics. The images created this picture of a high-budget, immersive, almost psychedelic experience, and people bought tickets based entirely on that synthetic map of the event.
Only to show up and find what was basically an almost empty, sparsely decorated warehouse.
Precisely. The simulacrum, the fantastic AI graphic that became the primary compelling reality. The physical event was this low-resolution footnote, a disappointing, frustrating, and frankly fraudulent physical version of the digital lie.
It shows where the incentive is. It's in creating the beautiful, frictionless lie, not the costly, difficult, high-friction truth. Which brings us to the creators. This overwhelming volume of synthetic content creates an immediate economic and existential crisis for actual human creators, the writers, artists, developers, musicians. If AI can produce content endlessly for free, what happens to the value of human work?
It collapses. It's simple economics. Generative AI creates a sudden, massive oversupply in nearly every creative category. And this drastically dilutes the perceived and actual economic value of every authentically human-made piece.
So if 100,000 novels can be generated instantly and cheaply, my one human-written novel is now competing against an infinite ocean of noise.
Exactly. And to stay relevant in this attention economy, creators are forced into this pressure cooker where the market just demands sheer quantity over deep, time-consuming quality.
And the relationship between the creator and the consumer has completely inverted. It's no longer enough just to create something. Now you bear this heavy, expensive burden of proving that your content is authentically human-made.
That's right. The immediate suspicion that anything too polished or produced too fast or even just too generic must be AI generated. It creates a new cost, the cost of authentication.
Oh, we've seen this in the video game industry, right?
Acutely. Gamers, who are always vigilant, have started making accusations based on subtle visual anomalies. It's compelling small studios to release these detailed process videos showing concept sketches, wireframes, hours of development footage, just to defend themselves against false accusations of using AI slop.
Which is an economic drag.
Yes.
It's labor spent justifying labor, not creating new work.
Absolutely. And compounding this defensive posture is the issue of uncompensated appropriation. The fact that these AI models are trained on human work without consent or payment, the machines are using the history of human creativity to undercut the very people who built that history.
The legal response has been huge. I want to talk about the Anthropic settlement in September of 2025. That was a landmark case.
It really was. Anthropic, a major AI developer, they settled a class action lawsuit raised by authors who claimed their copyrighted works were used without permission to train the Claude AI model.
And the settlement was for $1.5 billion. Which on the surface sounds like a massive victory, the largest copyright recovery in history. But I'm wondering, when you look closer, does a settlement like that actually deter the behavior?
That is the critical question. Because while the number is huge in absolute terms, context is everything. The intellectual property lawyer Aaron Moss made this really stinging critique. He pointed out that $1.5 billion is small compared to Anthropic's astronomical $183 billion valuation.
So in that light, it's not a stop sign. It's just a speeding ticket.
He called it exactly that, a speeding ticket, rather than a true stop sign for the industry. It's a tolerable cost of doing business. It's just priced into the valuation of the company.
And that feeling of it being not enough is amplified when you look at the scope of the suit versus the scope of the alleged theft.
Precisely. The settlement only covered about 500,000 pirated books. Moss noted this was a fraction of the works claimed to have been used, with some estimates reaching as high as 7 million.
So even the biggest legal victories can't capture the full scope of the problem.
They struggle to. It just demonstrates the systemic challenge. The financial barriers to this kind of mass appropriation remain dangerously low compared to the profits that the models generate. The map of intellectual property has been redrawn, and the creators are getting pennies for their territory.
And this fraud isn't just in text and images. Music streaming platforms are facing a torrent of fraud that is making the whole system almost unworkable.
It's a profound problem. One major streaming platform reported that an astounding 70% of streams of AI-generated tracks were from fake listeners.
70%.
70. Bots or organized click farms, all designed specifically to rack up streams and generate fraudulent royalty payments for scammers. It just artificially inflates the popularity of these synthetic artists.
So most of the economic activity for that class of music is just driven by fake consumption.
It fundamentally warps the market. The case of the Velvet Sundown illustrates this perfectly. This band, they amassed over 850,000 listeners, seemingly overnight, only to be revealed as a synthetic music project, largely AI-generated with some human oversight to maximize streams.
Which creates this climate of mistrust, where the platforms have to fight AI with AI, and then they sometimes end up punishing real artists.
That's the irony. The automated detectors can sometimes flag and take down legitimate, human-made, independent content, further punishing the very people they should be protecting.
So we've seen how AI slop is toxic in the consumer world, but it hasn't stayed there. It has migrated right into the enterprise. It's creating what we're calling work slop. AI-generated memos, reports, presentations that they look good, the language is polished, but they have no substance. Polished nonsense at machine speed.
And this is where all those promised productivity gains just go to die. The conventional wisdom was that generative AI would enhance efficiency, right? It would offload routine tasks. Instead, work slop is actively destroying productivity. A Harvard Business Review study demonstrated that this low-quality, high-volume content, it just hampers efficiency by creating unnecessary but wasteful chore, cleanup work. Colleagues have to fact-check, synthesize, vet, or sometimes completely rewrite the output.
And how much does that cleanup actually cost in terms of time?
The research showed it takes a significant, measurable amount of time, an average of 2 hours per instance of work slop.
2 hours.
2 hours. So imagine the aggregate cost of an entire team spending 2 hours vetting every AI-drafted document. The net result isn't efficiency. It's friction, it's resentment, and it's a measurable negative return on investment.
And I imagine the content gets passed up the chain, just compounding the problem.
Absolutely. The cycle is truly vicious. It leads to what experts call an AI feedback loop or model collapse. When AI models train on high-quality human-generated truth, they perform well. But when they start training on low-quality slop, their own output or other AI output, the quality just continually degrades.
Garbage in, garbage out. But now the garbage is training the next generation of garbage.
Exactly. The underlying informational structure decays exponentially. MIT Media Lab research shows that a staggering 95% of organizations see no measurable ROI from AI when it's used non-strategically.
Because they've enabled work slop instead of efficiency.
Precisely. Let's take a common scenario. A mid-level employee has to analyze a market segment. Instead of doing real research, they use an AI to draft a report. It's light on substance, but it sounds very authoritative.
Okay.
That polished yet hollow document gets passed up to a senior manager. That manager, who is already overwhelmed, uses another AI to summarize the already bloated, unverified report for the executive team.
So the output is a summary of nothing. Did the company actually learn anything new?
No. They just spent internal resources, salary costs, subscription costs on AI-facilitated busy work that generates zero value. They extracted a digital artifact, the summary, instead of engaging with the messy territory, the market data.
So the antidote isn't to ban AI, but to be strategic. Use it for the genuinely repetitive stuff.
Exactly. Focus it on repetitive, low-complexity tasks to free up employees for the complex, human-required work of analysis, verification, and critical thinking.
Okay, so AI is flooding the content ecosystem with slop on the supply side, diminishing the value of human creation. Now let's pivot to the demand side. Let's focus on how our attention, our one truly finite resource, is being systemically colonized and weaponized. This is the neuropolitical coup.
Right, and this isn't just about distractions. This is about the algorithmic colonization of our minds. Human attention is, without question, the principal object of economic capture in the digital age. It's treated as a currency, a resource to be mined.
And the whole system is optimized for what?
Purely for engagement, which just means the time you spend scrolling and the profitability of the ads you see, there is zero built-in optimization for truth, for well-being, or for democratic value.
We hear this term algorithmic colonization a lot. If attention is a resource, how exactly is it being mined?
Social critics describe tech platforms as open pit mines. They're not providing a benevolent service, they're extracting two things: your attention and your behavioral surplus, the data from your clicks and movements. And they do this by surgically exploiting your dopamine loops, the neurological pathways that drive pleasure and reward.
And this exploitation is directly eroding what's called cognitive autonomy, my ability to consciously direct my own focus.
It is. The systematic capture erodes our capacity for deep thought. The platforms act like cognitive herbicides.
Wow.
Yeah, just constantly spraying our mental landscape with fragmented, emotionally charged stimuli. Research shows this constant bombardment actually degrades the functionality of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for sustained attention and impulse control.
So it's physically making it harder for me to think deeply.
It makes it physically and mentally harder to sustain focus, to consolidate memories, or engage in complex, non-instantaneous problem solving.
And you argue that this constant stimulation completely eliminates our capacity for boredom. Which seems odd. Why is boredom so important?
Boredom is essential. It's not a void. It is the fertile ground from which creativity and self-reflection grow. When you're forced to be still, when your phone is away, or you're waiting in line, your mind starts to drift, to solve internal problems, to consolidate experience.
The internal dialogue.
That internal dialogue is fundamental to being an informed citizen, to forming an identity. But the entire digital system is engineered for instantaneity. It ensures you are never truly idle. If you're always being fed content, you lose the mental space you need for that deep, sustained, internal processing.
And this cognitive colonization is achieved through incredibly addictive design. This isn't an accident, it's intentional engineering.
Oh, it's highly intentional. The design borrows heavily from behavioral psychology and, frankly, gambling. Platforms use variable reward mechanisms. It's the same intermittent reinforcement you see in slot machines.
So I pull the lever, I refresh the feed.
And you might get a massive dopamine hit, a viral comment, a shocking piece of news, or you might get nothing. That unpredictability triggers the strongest response. It ensures compulsive engagement.
And this is amplified by gamification, streaks, verification checks.
All of it. It exploits social comparison and, critically, loss aversion. You don't want to lose your digital standing.
And the addiction figures that result from this are just staggering.
They're sobering. The average person spends nearly 7 hours a day online. 2 hours and 25 minutes of that is just on social media.
That's a huge chunk of our waking lives.
It is, and worse, medical estimates suggest that roughly 1 in 10 Americans suffers from a diagnosable social media addiction. The system is engineered to be hard to put down. It uses hormone hacking that triggers fear of missing out, fear of being isolated when you're not online.
And when this engineered addiction meets political discourse, the results become toxic. The algorithms aren't neutral. They're optimized to favor whatever gets the most engagement, which usually means polarization and outrage.
The data on this is definitive. Algorithms systematically reward emotional, divisive content. Studies show a direct correlation between divisiveness and reach. The use of out-group-related language, referencing the abstract liberals or Republicans, increases the likelihood of a post being shared by a shocking 67%.
67%. So the fastest way to go viral is to find a group to hate.
That is what the algorithm rewards.
And the speed of misinformation in this environment must be terrifying.
It accelerates it. One study found that false news spreads 6 times faster than truthful news on Twitter, now X.
Why?
Because the algorithms are prioritizing the emotional, inflammatory content that drives that massive share rate. Truth is slow, it's nuanced, it's high friction. Lies are fast, simple, and high emotion.
And this systemic prioritization leads to what you call the inversion of political discourse. We're watching the democratic process get reduced and fragmented.
Exactly. Substantive, high-friction debate, like a C-SPAN hearing, which is hours of nuanced testimony and policy detail, is being supplanted by a curated flash of engineered outrage. That 20-second context-stripped clip on TikTok with dramatic music and on-screen text, that becomes the definitive event for millions.
So the map of the conflict, the short, viral clip, reframes what's politically important and actively erodes our collective memory.
It makes it impossible to foster any shared understanding or civic trust across different groups.
This brings us back to the power of that hypersaturated screen versus the low-resolution reality. The Elias anecdote captures this perfectly.
It does. Elias was a man with a genuine civic desire to participate. But the algorithm hijacked that desire. It monetized his emotional dysregulation. He was bombarded daily by these 15-second clips that spiked his heart rate and filled him with this visceral rage toward an abstract political enemy.
So when he finally showed up to a real-life town hall meeting, he was expecting a war zone.
He was. But he found only the low-resolution reality of his neighbors discussing banalities, zoning laws, potholes, school budgets. His hyper-saturated urgency, his digital mindset, it just clashed violently with the banality of local government.
The tragedy is that the system wasn't mobilizing him for genuine collective action.
Not at all. It was using him to generate metadata for an ad tech company. He was a victim of a system designed to sell emotional friction. The process of real citizenship, the patience, the listening, the complexity was completely eroded by the addiction cycles of his screen. The system teaches us that if it isn't immediate, intense, and perfectly filtered, it isn't real. The map had colonized his sense of meaningful participation.
Okay, now let's look at the legal framework that enforces this colonization. The opaque contracts, privacy policies and terms of service, or TOS. They are notoriously dense, verbose, and functionally unreadable. And the data is clear. Nearly 80% of us accept them without even a glance.
So we're effectively signing away our rights without ever providing informed consent. The entire concept is fundamentally violated in the digital space. You're presented with the illusion of choice, agree to the TOS, or don't use the service, but it's a non-negotiable take it or leave it proposition.
And these documents are drafted to protect the companies, not the user.
Of course. They're legally complex and highly intimidating by design.
So what are the most damaging clauses that are buried in those thousands of words?
Well, they often contain 2 major mechanisms designed to shield corporations from accountability: mandatory binding individual arbitration and class action waivers.
Right, which forces you into a private process that notoriously favors the corporation and makes it impossible to sue as a group.
Exactly. You lose the power of collective action. Companies like Instagram and Hulu explicitly state in their terms that you waive your right to participate in a class action lawsuit.
So even if millions of users are harmed by the same action, they're forced to fight this corporate behemoth alone, in private, in an expensive setting. That is a profound imbalance of power.
It is, and the contracts are often intentionally overbroad. They're designed to sweep up any potential grievance into that arbitration pipeline. And even if some of the clauses are technically unenforceable, they're included to deceive the average user into thinking they've waived their rights. It's the scare tactic that works.
That overreach was perfectly illustrated by the Disney wrongful death case. That one was extreme.
That case is a legal marvel of corporate overreach. A husband filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Disney after his wife tragically died from a food mishandling incident at a Disney World restaurant. Disney legal team, however, they countered by arguing the husband had waived his right to a lawsuit because years earlier he had accepted an arbitration clause hidden in the terms of service for a free trial of Disney Plus Night.
A free trial he got through his PlayStation.
Through his PlayStation. They connected a life-altering negligence claim to a casual digital sign-up years prior for a completely unrelated streaming service.
It just shows how these routine, frictionless signups can strip away significant legal recourse.
It illustrates the profound imbalance of power. Companies can use these contractual loopholes to sidestep accountability by leveraging contracts nobody ever reads. The contract becomes a digital shield. The map, the legal structure, has successfully isolated and disempowered the territory, the individual user.
And what about the most vulnerable populations? Children. The ethical issues around platforms collecting and sharing data from minors are immense.
They're deeply concerning. We know that platforms collect and disclose sensitive data geolocation, commercial information, which is then shared with advertisers, data resellers, internet service providers. The problem is that if a child, maybe as young as 8 or 10, creates an account, they are agreeing to these dense, complex documents.
How can a child possibly provide meaningful, informed consent to have their entire personal profile built and sold by a global ad ecosystem?
They can't. It's impossible. The complexity of the TOS, the lack of transparency, their developmental stage, it all compounds the exploitation. The map of their digital activity is being built and monetized long before they develop the cognitive autonomy to understand the consequences. These contracts are the invisible infrastructure of the neuropolitical coup.
Okay, so we've established the contamination of our content and the colonization of our consciousness. The whole system is optimized for frictionless consumption and high emotional intensity. So what's the resistance strategy? And the answer, ironically, is to embrace the one thing the digital world is designed to eliminate: friction.
The resistance strategy is often called tactical Luddism, and it starts with a philosophical recalibration. User experience design, UX, reflexively advocates for eliminating friction, making everything seamless, painless, and effortless. But the relentless pursuit of ease risks forgetting that resistance and effort are fundamental aspects of being human. They're what contribute to our sense of meaning.
That's a profound thought. We seek ease, but we value difficulty.
Think about it. The anticipation of waiting for a complex meal at a great restaurant, the physical exertion of hiking to a peak, that time delay, that physical or mental effort, that is friction. And yet it contributes to the feeling of accomplishment, of grounding. It makes the reward feel earned. If we succeed in making life entirely frictionless, we may just succeed in stripping it of all meaning.
So we need to shift from reflexively getting rid of friction to intentionally designing it. We need a more neutral definition.
Yes. Friction should just be defined as any form of physical or mental effort or resistance. This encourages us to consider its value, not just its pain points. When friction is applied strategically, it becomes beneficial friction.
And what does beneficial friction actually do?
It actively disrupts mindless automatic interactions. It prompts moments of reflection and more mindful interaction. The goal isn't inconvenience for its own sake. It's about preventing mistakes, placing control back in your hands, and forcing a momentary pause that offers a critical learning opportunity.
It forces us to slow down, to use the deliberate, rational part of our brain instead of just reacting.
Exactly, and we actually see successful digital examples of this everywhere, mostly where security is a priority.
Like two-step authentication.
A classic example. It adds steps, it requires effort, but it protects your critical accounts. We accept the friction because the consequence of failure is high. Or think about those Gmail pop-ups that flag a forgotten attachment if you wrote the word attached. That minor friction prevents a major mistake.
And we're seeing this in modern communication platforms too, designed for behavioral change.
Absolutely. When Slack asks if you really want to notify someone who has snoozed their notifications, that's what it's doing. That brief moment of resistance forces the sender to consider the recipient's work-life balance before interrupting them. It puts the human connection first, not the sender's instant gratification.
So tactical Luddism encourages us to pursue the analog, not out of nostalgia, but for what you call cognitive calisthenics. It's about fighting back against the seductive ease of instantaneity by deliberately embracing effort.
And the simple act of making coffee is a perfect illustration. The low-friction experience is the drive-through, a styrofoam cup, a rapid caffeine delivery mechanism. The high-friction experience is manual preparation, turning consumption into a mindful ritual.
Detail that manual ritual. Why does it provide such deep meaning?
Imagine using an old-fashioned cast-iron coffee grinder. It requires substantial physical effort. You have to manually turn this enormous crank slowly, feeling the resistance of the beans. That investment of physical energy, the sound, the smell of the friction, these are tangible, multi-sensory reminders of your labor.
So the coffee literally tastes better because you earned it.
It contributes to these deep feelings of accomplishment, pride, and agency. You earned it. This contrasts so sharply with frictionless digital communication, like writing on a typewriter.
Which is the definition of high-friction writing.
Modern keyboards are designed to disappear. A typewriter is the opposite. It's high-friction, heavy key strikes, loud mechanical sounds, physical exertion for every letter.
But this resistance, paradoxically, it increases your engagement.
It forces you into a different cognitive gear. The typewriter compels you to consider our words carefully before committing them to the page. You can't endlessly edit and erase. The commitment to the page is physical. Plus, there's a recognized cognitive benefit in the subtle imperfections of the print, something called disfluency.
Disfluency.
Yeah, where the text is slightly messy or misaligned. That slight visual resistance actually results in deeper information processing because your brain has to work a tiny bit harder to read it.
We see this meaning through friction in music too, an area that has become almost entirely frictionless.
Yes. Think about making a mixtape on a cassette in the 80s or 90s. That was enormous, intentional effort. Waiting for the right song on the radio, timing the recording perfectly, carefully arranging the track list. That substantial investment of care and energy is precisely why those mixtapes were valued so highly compared to today's low-friction, algorithmic playlists.
Or the vinyl record enthusiast. Their entire connection to the music is defined by high friction.
It's a complex, ritualistic process. It starts with physical handling, cleaning the vinyl, gently placing it on the turntable, examining the oversized artwork. Then comes the deliberate friction of the needle drop. Far from being a distraction, that scratchy sound is an intentional, pleasant signal.
It's a reminder to be present.
It's a reminder to breathe, sit down, and be present. It serves as a bulwark against the busy, instantaneous age, proving that effort and ritual can provide a layer of deep relaxation that supersedes mere ease of use. The physical reality of the record is stronger than the digital artifact of the stream.
And this resistance strategy can be scaled up from a personal habit into physical space. Architects are intentionally using analog design to create physical sanctuaries that act as a bulwark against digital overstimulation.
A phenomenal example is the new Circadia installation at the University of Toronto. Its explicit intent was to create a radical space for visitors to disconnect from technology and reconnect with their own circadian rhythm. It was designed to be this immersive, cave-like environment, fostering what the creators called mental spelunking.
So what were the specific design features that enforced this beneficial friction?
Well, the entrance itself was a friction point, the transitory zone. It was a 72-foot-long hallway where you had to remove your shoes and store all your belongings, especially phones and watches. That deliberate removal of technology was necessary to enforce the cognitive break.
And this led into the dark zone.
The dark zone, a cave-like soft environment designed with over 6,000 yards of industrial felt covering every surface to completely dampen sound. The sonic and tactile experience was designed to force internal focus.
To force you back into your own head.
Precisely. It had these large felted loungers with built-in speakers emitting soft humming noises. The design prioritized sensory deprivation and calm, helping people reclaim that sacred internal space of boredom. In that environment, the mind was encouraged to wander, reflect, and rebuild the cognitive autonomy the attention economy had harvested.
That focus on radical architectural disconnection is perfectly illustrated by the Faraday cage bar anecdote in London, a bar designed specifically to enforce digital friction.
The bar was lined entirely with copper mesh, essentially making the whole structure a functioning Faraday cage. It blocked all cellular signals and Wi-Fi. A tech worker named James visited, and his initial experience was revealing. He immediately felt intense physical anxiety, a phantom itch from the forced lack of connectivity. The colonized mind was literally fighting back.
The inversion was manifesting physically in him.
But the forced friction led to a necessary pivot. Unable to retreat into his device, he made eye contact with the person next to him, and they started complaining together about the wait time, a shared human analog struggle. By the end of the evening, the forced disconnection had resulted in this profound feeling of low-resolution calmness, a piece he hadn't realized he was missing.
And that is the core lesson, isn't it? We have optimized our world for seamlessness, but in doing so, we've stripped away the texture and deep meaning that comes from overcoming resistance.
The physical world, the territory, is inherently messy, difficult, high friction. The digital map is clean, optimized, and effortless. By choosing friction, by manually grinding coffee, by sitting in the quiet of a felt room, by being forced to talk to a stranger, we are plugging our consciousness back into the high voltage of actual reality. The future of luxury, the ultimate commodity, will be the exclusive, intentional privilege of disconnecting. We have to actively choose to disconnect, to connect, and rebuild our authentic self, piece by difficult piece.
So, to synthesize what we've discussed in this deep dive, we began by analyzing the economic contamination of the digital commons, defining AI, Slop, which devalues human creativity and pollutes our information supply. The map is actively destroying the territory of truth.
Then we detailed the cognitive and political assault on our attention, showing how algorithms weaponize our emotions, fragment our discourse, and undermine our legal autonomy through these opaque contracts, the whole infrastructure of the neuropolitical coup.
And finally, we explored the powerful counter-strategies of intentional friction. We show how architectural design and mindful analog resistance, tactical Luddism, can reclaim cognitive sovereignty.
Proving that the physical reality of effort, of imperfection, of time invested, that is where true, lasting meaning resides.
The struggle we face is truly existential. It's about reclaiming human agency, our intellectual property, our cognitive sovereignty in a world where, like we saw with that young woman at the Overlook, the digital proof of living has become more important, more valuable than the actual messy living itself. The path forward is difficult. It involves embracing friction, difficulty, and imperfection as the essential, authentic elements of a meaningful human experience. The ruins of the dead internet are not our tomb. They are the ground from which we must deliberately rebuild what is real.